Whether you are a therapist, an educator, or someone working with children, I bet you've had the situation where you have written a report, whether it's an IEP or given parent feedback or some kind of assessment, and you have a section there all about play skills. You've written about it, you've assessed it, but now what do you do with that information? Today we are going to be talking about the implication of our play assessments and how we can be infusing these into our time with the children that we work with. If we haven't met before, my name is Holly. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist, and I also run a conference every single year all about play. This year we talked about play-based learning or learning through play. So I wanted to come and make a video looking more at the idea of when we assess play, we should be then putting that ideas of what we've assessed into the actual practice that we are doing. So firstly, let's talk about play assessments. If you look in terms of professions, actually observing or structurally observing play is something that so many professions that work with children do, from occupational therapists to educators to psychologists. This is a huge component of what we all look at. There are, of course, things that are not observation. We also have actual assessments or standardized assessments that we use when it comes to play. For example, the SPT, the NOCS, the ESDM, the TOP assessment, the COPM can also include this, ADI-R, the VB map. These are just a few that we use across different professions, but when it comes down to actually writing the report, there's often a section in there that talks about how the child interacts and plays in their environment. So what do we do with that information that we have collected? Of course, when we look at play skills, what is so amazing about observing play and why it is so relevant for so many professions is because we actually see the performance components of the child's abilities shining through in the way that they interact and play. So for example, we see whether this is a child that is a fast start into play, that they are initiating, that they are really immediately entering into some kind of play dynamics, whether that's social play or individual or independent play. We also see how they manage in terms of that social interaction. Are they in other people's space? Are they calling friends to join them in something? Are they the follower? We also see how they interact in a motor way. So are they investigating different play equipment, or are they seeming to walk around the playground? The way that we observe and what we see from our children tells us a lot about how they manage. As we know, play is the language of our children. So when we observe them in play, we're essentially seeing how they can manage throughout life. So today I want to take 3 examples of things that we might be seeing when we're observing play and how we can take those off of the paper of our report, but actually start incorporating them into our practice with children as well as our recommendations. So the first one would be a child that is like a slow starter. We often see this, that a child enters into a play environment and they either sit or they find one kind of toy and maybe just hold that toy while observing. There could be a number of reasons for why this is happening. And of course, with every single child, we're really taking an individual approach. But one of the reasons that this can often be occurring is because of the child's alertness when it comes to playtime. So if that is the reason that you're thinking that this child is maybe not just hanging back, but seeming to struggle to kind of like get started in play, we then are using play both as our method, but also as our result. So what we would want to see, our goal would maybe be that the child can enter into a play space and actively engage with the things around. Now, the way that we approach this, when we let our assessment actually dictate the actual work that we're doing, our actual methodology, what we might be doing is kind of entering into the play space, doing some work in terms of sensory integration, in terms of boosting up that level of alertness. That might be specific kind of exercises or activities like jumping or shaking arms, or doing one of those like active pathways or brain break pathways to the play space to kind of get the child's alertness level increased. We're also wanting then for that child specifically that we're giving them easy access into that play space. So we might be saying, let's give them like a menu of possibilities that they can do here. So we're really showing them what is available for them. And then we're also wanting that those skills transfer to other play spaces that they enter, whether it is the park or at home or at a friend's house or environments like an after-school program that they might be involved in. Another example is if we see a child that is in another child's space all of the time. This is a really common one where children seem to not manage that space bubble, and they want to kind of get close to the other child. And this, again, we might be using some sensory strategies to really support our child in this understanding, because first they need to feel where their body is in space before they can respect the space and the body space of the other child. So we might be doing a lot of things that involve deep pressure, a lot of proprioception, and possibly some vestibular input to allow the child to first kind of put back inside of their own feelings of their body. And then you might be wanting to use like a social story or some kind of story that really hammers home this idea of personal body space that would support the child in that. We really like I think it's Julia Cook. She has a series of books that are really, really great for kind of walking children through these social situations. So I'll leave that book that we like linked below, but she has a whole series, so go and check her out as well. Another example would be a child that seems to struggle with emotional regulation during playtime. Frustration is kind of like a vitamin for our children in these early years. They need to experience it in order to know how to handle that, but it does come with quite a lot of big expressions and a lot of things that we as families and people working with children need to come alongside our children and support. So what we don't want to do when a child is really struggling with frustration, and this is something we've noted in our assessment, our plan can often then be that we sit with the child alone, away from other children, do individual therapy or work on social skills with like a social skills poster. And while there is space for plans like this, when we are looking at integrating what we've learned from our play observation into practice, we kind of can't skip past play, right? Because that's where we're seeing the frustration or the difficulty coming out. So this again changes maybe our therapeutic or educational perspective in terms of how we're going to be supporting the child in this, in that we don't want it to be isolated away from the actual situation that is difficult. We want to do some kind of like on-the-job training. So we want to come alongside the child in social situations, in maybe it's a group therapy session that you're doing, or maybe it is that you have an assistant that is supporting the child during break time or recess time. But in that situation, we are wanting to, whatever our tools are, whether they're like educating the child, whether we are using sensory strategies to, again, support their overall modulation so that they can handle the sensory information that is coming in, so that frustration tolerance is more enabled for our children, or whether we're taking, again, like a really emotional stance on it and doing a lot of like name it to tame it and these kind of strategies. We're wanting to do that like in the time that they are playing. And if that is absolutely out of the question for whatever reason, then again, we're wanting to do it in small groups. I know for me as a therapist, I've often brought another child into our therapy time, even though this is child X's therapy time. We know that they need another child to kind of make the environment conducive to the goal that we're working on. So another child will come in, even though it's not their therapy time, to support that goal is being met. This also really comes in when we talk about play-based learning, when we again are wanting to infuse what we are learning and what we are reporting on when we see our children into their whole life and also into their play environments and time. So I have a video that is linked below that walks you through 3 levers that you can start to pull to really start integrating play into learning. So you are learning through play, and I will see you over there.